Welcome to the True Man Podcast. This is an invitation, a radical reconstruction of a man's masculine heart and soul in a place of safe community where we dare to ask questions deep seated inside a man and explore ways to help you become a better man, a better son, a better dad, and a better spouse. And boy, I hope that's what you're after. You're going to get a little bit of that here today. So, welcome back to the True Man Podcast. Well, we are kicking off the summertime schedules here, right? Just like you, just like every other family. It's time for vacations and the many fun things that happen over the next couple of months. So I am very grateful that you take the time to join me on the True Man podcast as we move into this time of year. And in fact, the True Man Life Coaching website, which is undergoing a little bit of construction, but still available to you. You can always head out there and get all the latest updates and news. This is also where you can find the podcast, my book, True Man, True Ways, a roadmap of discovery to the masculine heart. And all of that will continue as we morph this down into the American family renaissance and really start drilling down into the importance of the American values for men and their families. And I am really, really pumped and excited about what's coming. And so, therefore, I'm not taking my foot off the gas pedal here this summer. I have some hard-hitting shows coming at you, all designed to help you start thinking more about the idea of more and freedom. What does it look like for you? How do you want more freedom in your life, more intimacy with Christ? So we're going to challenge you over the next few weeks. We're going to have some real hard-hitting episodes, and that begins today with this idea of what in the world does biblical masculinity actually look like? You ever wonder about that? Now, my best guess is your preacher isn't talking about this from the pulpit. But today, we're going to reframe biblical masculinity and what it looks like. So when you hear the words biblical masculinity, what comes to your mind? Is it a guy's Bible study with a bunch of dudes sitting around drinking bad coffee? How about a pastor in a cardigan sweater telling you to be nicer to your wife? Or how about a list of rules about what you can and can't do? Boring. If any of that hit you, well, you're not alone. And right there is the start of the problem. Because somewhere along the way, the church took one of the most powerful, world-changing ideas in human history, the idea of a godly man, and turned it into something so soft, so watered down, so safe, that most men want absolutely nothing to do with it. And that's not just a church problem, by the way. That's a family problem, a culture problem, a generational problem, something that's been going on in our church, in our culture for a long, long time. So today we're going to talk about what biblical masculinity actually looks like. How about that? Not this version that has been sanitized for Sunday mornings. The real version, the one that will cost you something, the one that if you take it seriously will change every relationship in your life. So let's get into it. How about it? Where has the church failed men? Let's get honest about this. So I want to start somewhere that I don't think most men want to say out loud. A lot of men have checked out of the church, not because they stopped believing in God, not because the church stopped speaking to it, but it's because the church stopped speaking to them as men. So think about the men in your life, your friends, your brothers, the guys you work with, how many of them would say the church is in the place they go to get strengthened? How many of them walk out of a Sunday service feeling like they've been sharpened, challenged, called up to something bigger than themselves? Or did they use it as a 15-minute nap? Now, I'm not trying to throw churches under the bus. There are great ones doing great work. But broadly, we have produced a version of the Christian man that looks a whole lot more like a guy who's trying not to make anyone uncomfortable than a man who's been called to lead, to protect, to build something that outlasts him. And here's what that has produced: men who are passive at home, men who are checked out emotionally, men who are present physically, but absent in every way that actually matters. Now, a man who's been emasculated by the very institution that was supposed to make him more of who God created him to be, well, here's the truth. Jesus was not soft. Jesus flipped tables. He looked religious leaders in the face and he called them hypocrites. He walked into the wilderness alone for 40 days. He chose 12 rough, ordinary men, fishermen and tax collectors, and turned them into the most influential people in human history. Think about what they grew. This is the model. Not a man who avoids conflict, a man who engages it with truth, with conviction, with love, and one that has a spine. So before we talk about what biblical masculinity looks like, we need to bury the counterfeit version, don't we? So ask yourself this: what version of manhood am I actually living out? God's or the culture's? Hold that question, because we're going to come back to it. So culture really has created two versions of a man right now, and neither one of them is working. On one side, you've got the hyper aggressive, dominance obsessed version. The guy who measures his worth by how much money he makes, how many women he can conquer, and how much power he can accumulate. Now, the guy who treats vulnerability like a disease and intimacy like a weakness. Do you know that guy? You see this all over social media. Men being told that strength means never needing anyone. On the other side of the coin, you've got the passive, self-erasing version. The guy who's been told his masculinity is inherently toxic, that he needs to shrink himself, apologize for his instincts, and check his strength at the door. The guy who's so afraid of being too much that he becomes, well, nothing at all. Here's what both of those versions produce: broken families. You see, the aggressive guy, his wife can't trust him, his kids are afraid of him or distant from him. His home is run by his ego, not his faith. The passive guy, on the other hand, well, his wife doesn't respect him. His kids don't follow him because there's nothing to follow, and his home drifts with no anchor. You see, neither of those men is leading. They're just existing. And I've sat across from both types in my coaching. The aggressive guy who finally breaks down and admits he has no idea how to actually love his wife, and the passive guy who's desperate to lead but has no idea where to start because nobody ever showed him. So here's the hard question: which of these two versions do the people in your home experience? Not which one you think you are. Which one do they experience? You see, that's the measure that matters. So, what is biblical masculinity? What is it? So I want to give you a definition, not a perfect one, but one worth considering. Biblical masculinity is strength surrounded to purpose. Not strength abandoned, not strength hidden, strength surrendered, meaning it's under authority. It's directed. It's got a reason bigger than itself. Let me show you what that looks like in the men that God actually used in the Bible. So, David, he wasn't a soft man at all. In fact, he killed a lion and a bear with his own bare hands before he faced Goliath. He was a warrior for sure. He was fierce. But that same man wrote some of the most vulnerable, emotionally honest poetry in human history. He wept over his enemies. He danced in the streets with abandoned joy, and he confessed his worst failures before God and didn't hide. David was fierce and tender, a warrior and a worshiper. Now, that's not a contradiction. Men, that is a template. Look at Nehemiah. He's rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem with opposition on every side. Enemies threatening his life, corruption from within. What does he do? He prays, he works, and he tells his men, don't be afraid. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons and your daughters and your wives and your homes. Fight for your home. You see, right there, that's biblical masculinity, is it not? Look at Paul. He was a man who had people beaten and killed before his conversion. After Christ, he planted churches across the known world and was beaten, shipwrecked, imprisoned, and he wrote this: I have learned in whatever state I am to be content, not passive, not broken, anchored. And here's what these men have in common. They knew who they were. They knew who they served, and they did not flinch. That's what biblical masculinity looks like. It's not a checklist. It's not an identity. It's not a checklist. Excuse me. It's an identity. And it starts with knowing whose you are before you figure out who you are. And let me ask you something. Do you know whose you are? Yeah, I didn't for a long time. I really didn't. I didn't even understand the phrase, because this is not as a theological concept as you might think. In real life, in the decisions you make, the way you handle pressure, the way you lead your family when things get hard, does that life reflect a man who knows whose he is, that he belongs to God? Because the reality is everything flows through that. So here is where we get practical today, because an identity without a structure is just inspiration, and inspiration without application, well, it fades by Thursday, doesn't it? And I want to give you 5 domains where biblical masculinity gets lived out, not perfected, lived out. These aren't boxes to check. They're just arenas for you to show up in. And you know you want to be the man in the arena, right? So let's look at your spiritual life. This is the foundation. Everything else stands on this, or it doesn't stand at all. A spiritually grounded man doesn't just know about God, he talks to God. He's in the Word not because it's a religious duty, but because he's hungry. He leads his household not with authority, not with authority he demanded, but with authority he was given, and he knows the difference. So here's the test. Is your spiritual life something that your family sees or something they've just heard about? Two, emotional. I know some of you just tensed up when you heard me say that, but stick with me here. Emotional strength is not emotional expression for its own sake. It's the ability to feel without being controlled by what you feel. You see, a man can't manage his anger. If a man can't manage his anger, it will destroy his home. You know this is true. A man who can't access grief will be unreachable to his children. And a man who's never been honest about his fear will never lead anyone through theirs. You see, you are allowed to feel. You are not allowed to use your feelings as weapons or excuses. What emotion are you most afraid to admit to the people closest to you? Three, physical. Your body is stewardship. Take that in. You don't need to be a bodybuilder, but you need to be a man, but you can't be a man who neglects his physical health or is slowly withdrawing from his ability to protect, provide, and be present. You can't show up at your best when you're running on no sleep, no exercise, and a diet garbage. Diet of garbage. It does not work. You have to take care of this machine, not for vanity, for longevity, because your family not only needs you around, they want you around. Four, relational. Biblical masculinity is not a solo project. You see, every man God used in Scripture was connected. David had Jonathan, Paul had Timothy, Jesus had 12 men he poured himself into for 3 solid years. Isolation is not strength. In fact, it is a liability. Who knows you? Not your social media profile, you. Who has access to your real life? Now, if you can't name one man who actually knows what's going on in your life right now, right there, that's your first assignment. 5, purposeful. A man with no mission will fill that vacuum with something. I've seen this time and time again, usually something that'll cost him. You were not created to consume, you were created to build, to live something, to leave something behind, to raise children who outlive you and carry something worth carrying. What are you building? Not just in your career, but in your family, your community, your faith. What will your grandchildren know about the man you choose to be? Now, here's where I want to land this podcast today. Biblical masculinity isn't a personality type. It's not just for the confident guys or the naturally disciplined guys or the guys who had a great father to model it for them. It's a call, and it's on every man listening today. You see, the world doesn't need more men performing strength. It needs more men who are actually strong. And in their faith, in their character, in their relationships, and of course, in their purpose. Your wife doesn't need a perfect husband. She needs a present one who's moving towards something real. Your kids don't need a flawless father. They need a man who shows up, owns his failures, gets back up, and keeps on going, because that's what they'll do when life hits them hard. So teach them well. And this is the thing that I want you to hold on to. Real strength begins when you become honest enough to ask for help. Not from a place of weakness, from a place of knowing that no man, not David, not Paul, not Nehemiah, did it alone. Every man God used was a man who was willing to be sharpened, corrected, and connected. So here's your challenge before next week. Pick one of those 5 domains that I listed: spiritual, emotional, physical, relational, purposeful, and answer honestly. Where am I the most underdeveloped? Don't pick the easy one either. You're better than that, dude. Come on now. Pick the real one. And then do one thing this week to move in that direction. That's it. One domain, one step. That's how reconstruction begins. Now, if this episode hit you here this week, share it with another man who needs to hear it. That's how this podcast grows, not through algorithms and social media and all that fun stuff that I try to get out there, but men telling another man in truth about what he's heard. And maybe that man needs to hear it too. And as I always say, I would encourage you, take this topic to your small group, talk about it, learn from each other, build on it, see what happens. And if you'd like to talk to me more about it, you can always reach out to me at mike@truemanlifecoaching.com, and my calendar's out on my website. Just reach out to me. If you've got a group that you'd love for me to come speak to online or in person, just let me know. I'm happy to have that conversation with you. Well, wow, what a fun podcast to go through this week. They always are, but this one was a little crispy, wasn't it? It's a hard topic to talk about, but certainly something that we need to address. So until next week, God bless you. Thank you for listening, and go out and make this your very, very best week ever. Thanks for listening.